Now, when you say depression is like is the feeling of being trapped, right? Restricted and limited, right? Is there a way where people can cold turkey switch, or is it like baby steps and then build momentum? Because you know Andrew Tate, he says you snap and you change your brain.
It's the approach I take, which has been the most effective, which I'm working on my own theory of counseling, is what we call the compound effect. So the idea with depression is that there's a cycle, right? There's a certain type of thinking, that's the cognitive component, which is going to influence a certain type of behavior. If you have a negative thought, oh, I'm going to fail this test, the behavior that follows from that is that you won't study for the test. The consequence of that is that you fail the test. And then that reinforces the initial thought, oh, I'm going to fail, I'm stupid, I'm dumb. My question is, how do we break out of that cycle? How do we break the cycle? Do we start at the cognitive component to change the thinking? Do we start at the behavioral component where we start to incorporate what we call behavioral activation? And by the way, I'm using the jargon on purpose because I'm not doing counseling. I'm sort of explaining the thinking behind it.
We like footnotes and explain footnotes. But is it, when you hear those motivational guys say, just don't be depressed, just snap your fingers, and is it baby steps and build momentum, or is it like, has anyone ever cold turkeyed just changed their brain in a day? Because I would say that,
unless it's a manic episode, I've never seen that. You have to compound small benefits.
If it is a manic episode, it would be temporary, so it'd never happen, right? If it's mania, it's going to go away.
No, I'm just saying that's the only time we see switches like that. If I saw a switch like that, I would be concerned. I'm assessing for different things now.
What if they just accepted God in their heart, boom, changed in a day?
No, that tends not to be like sustainable. But I like the idea of it. Like, I just haven't seen it. It could exist.
I'm thinking of prisoners.
Honestly, I like the idea. So you and I think in a previous episode, John, we talked about the schema shifts, right? So there's this idea that when there is a trauma that happens, our beliefs about the world, about ourselves, about other people change. We start to think, instead of the world being predictable and fair, we start to see it as unpredictable, unfair. And then it would follow from that anxiety is the best response to that. If you think the world is unpredictable, it's unfair. A hypervigilance, like being very vigilant about what's happening around you, the expectation that something's about to happen, that's a very fair response to those types of beliefs. But just to go back to the prisoner thing, it's not crazy to think that, you could have a reverse trauma where you go to prison and then it sort of shifts your thinking entirely in that way. There's a schema shift towards spirituality.
So the prison would be, you wouldn't give it to the holy book. The lifestyle change where they're actually in a cage.
Yeah,
that's
the trauma of the cage. Yeah.
I never thought of it like that. Damn, you kind of debunking our whole spiritual thing we got going on.
That's the insight perspective.
Yeah. I mean, we're still right. There's still a God, but no, I've never. That's such a good one. That is such a good one. That is. Yeah, I had this theory that most people who keep going back, criminals keep getting locked up, right? Usually, if they have a felony, they keep going back in.
Which they do. Yeah.
But I had a theory that in their subconscious, they want the state to take care of them because they're out of control. So they keep doing things. They don't take let's say they're drug dealing, they don't take the easy way home. They go through the way with all the police, and they risk it, and they do a line. And
I like that. The idea that there's a sense of, there was a lack of authority in their lives, and now they've outsourced that to the state. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But that's so weird that...
Recidivism rates are...
So I guess this experience humans have on Earth, most of it is just finding out, let's say the subconscious is an elephant, a mammoth, and you feed it peanuts to appease it, but eventually that mammoth will walk you into prison, right? If that's who you are. Most of our reality on Earth is understanding not who we are consciously, but stuff that we can't control, like our subconscious. Does that make sense?
Yeah, explain it again.
Like... a prisoner will eventually understand he wants to go back to prison, right? His subconscious wants him to go back, right? Doesn't that mean every human on Earth has to understand their deep subconscious thoughts, the reasons why they do things?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm working on my own theory just based on like what works best with my clients. I take notes like, okay, this worked. I'm going to apply it again. And it seems that, so something that I've come to the realization of is that there has to be a congruence between the internal and the external. You as a person, the ego, which in psychology we just mean your sense of self. It has no negative connotation associated with it. Identity, yeah. Okay. Your sense of self has to match the values that you have to match with the life that you're living. When it isn't, that cognitive dissonance comes up. That's when anxiety. Where anxiety follows depression.
When you say that your internal values have to match your external, you're saying if you're a vegan, you have to adhere to that lifestyle. You can't be if you're a vegan who eats meat every day, you're going to be very depressed.
Yeah, that's not a vegan. That's legit. Yeah, so if you have like, if your value system is, let's say, I'll tell you my values. For me, family is very important. So I'm willing to make more sacrifices for the family, even at my own expense, even though I recognize that that risks the potential for codependency, where people start to become more reliant on me. But that's a value system that I've come to terms with. That I've said to myself, I'm willing to make more sacrifices for my family. So when I don't, when I do something that's not compatible, anti-family, something that's not compatible with those values, I immediately feel a sense of shame, right? Which is the most powerful emotion. You and I have talked about that quite often. Sense of shame, sense of guilt.
When I think of like the Zherkas, anytime we want to shame each other, whether it's our mom, dad, brother, we always go to, oh, you snaking the family. Like we use this family as this shame structure.
Collective,
What about people who don't have family?
Yeah. Oh, so I was just talking about my value systems. Yeah. Okay. So the thing that
No.
the thing that
No. It can't be. The family cannot. No human is gonna say, "Oh, I have a different one than family." That's like a cop out.
there's tons of people who don't have the same, haven't had the same family experience that you and I have had.
Right. But then those guys are lost.
No, they're not.
What the hell are you talking about? So people without family are lost.
No, there's some families that really don't have the person's best interest at heart, and in those cases, you are better off. Starting. The answer is not to never have a family, but to put certain boundaries around your family.
I don't know. I see like people get yelled at by a boss that pays them $10 an hour, and they deal with it. But then they can't get yelled at by their dad.